Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take the exhaustive list of sources you provided and turn it into the deepest, most actionable knowledge possible.
And today, we are really immersing ourselves in Paris.
A city that, it just defines so much of global culture, history, and urban resilience.
It's a spectacular subject.
Yeah.
And the sources we have, they let us look far beyond, the usual tourist pictures.
Right.
We're going to dissect the deep history, the political architecture, the hidden administrative gears, and, well, the sheer economic force that drives this massive global hub.
Absolutely. And even the name City of Light, La Ville Lumière, is often misunderstood, isn't it?
It is. People think it's about streetlights.
Yeah, Louis XIV of putting in street lighting.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's rooted much more deeply in the intellectual glow of the Age of Enlightenment.
Exactly. That symbolic power, the power of ideas. That's where Paris really got its lasting influence.
But if you want a concise history of the city, you don't have to look much further than its official motto,
Fluctuat nec mergitur.
which is Latin for
Tossed by the waves, but never sunk.
that just nails it. It perfectly encapsulates centuries of political turmoil, revolution, occupation, and just constant architectural reinvention.
It really does.
So what's our mission for this deep dive? We're using the comprehensive stack of articles and research you gave us to trace Paris all the way from its ancient Celtic settlement,
That's
right through to its current status as a hyper-modern global city that's grappling with all these complex challenges like sustainable transit and housing shortages.
And to frame this whole discussion, you first have to see Paris as this unique urban laboratory. It's all about contrast.
How so?
Well, its metropolitan area is the fourth most populous in the European Union. We're talking a staggering 13.17 million people.
Huge.
But the city core, the administrative city of Paris itself, is surprisingly tiny. Just 105.4 square kilometers.
Wow.
Which makes it one of the most intensely dense urban spaces in the world. And that density, that's the engine of its history and its future.
Okay, so let's unpack that history. We should probably go all the way back to the Iron Age.
To the roots.
Yeah, to the roots of the city with a powerful Gallic tribe called the Parisii.
That's where it all begins. And the very name Paris, of course, is derived directly from them.
So the first written record we have comes from Julius Caesar.
Julius Caesar, yes. In the mid-1st century BC, he mentions this settlement, which was probably a fortified river island, an oppidum,
And he called it.
Lutetia Parisiorum. Literally, Lutetia of the Parisii.
It's just fascinating that a city this iconic has a name that's so shrouded in, well, linguistic debate. It's not a simple story.
Not at all.
So what are the competing theories for the name Lutetia?
The Celtic root is notoriously murky. One theory, and this one's kind of amusing, links it to the root lucat,
Linging.
mouse. So if that were true, the earliest Parisian landmark would basically be Mousetown.
Mousetown. It certainly clashes with the whole City of Light image.
It does, which is why the second interpretation is considered, far more historically probable.
Which is,
That theory gets the name from the Celtic root ludo, which means marsh or swamp.
that makes more sense.
It does. If you look at the city's early geography, right in the bend of the Seine, prone to flooding, swamp town, or marshy place, is much more appropriate. It's contextually resonant.
And if Lutetia is a debate, the tribe name, the Parisii, is even more so. What does the source material suggest there?
This is where you get some really evocative possibilities. One scholar suggested a connection to the Celtic root pario, meaning cauldron. So this might suggest a tribal role related to ritual or maybe trade.
A cauldron people. That sounds a bit more mythological.
Exactly. But other scholars have more direct, action-oriented ideas. One linked the name to a Welsh word suggesting they were lords or commanders.
Okay.
But maybe the most enduring theory translates Parisii as the spear people.
The spear people. I like that.
Yeah, it connects the name to an old Irish word for spear. So you see this transition from a potentially muddy little marsh town to a formidable strategic stronghold defended by spear people controlling the river.
And that strong river position is exactly why the Romans wanted it.
Of course.
Despite its swampy origins, our sources say that after Caesar's conquest in 52 BC, the Roman settlement wasn't just on the island. They built on the higher ground of the left bank.
They immediately recognized the logistical value. The Romans built a functional, highly prosperous town. It had the standard Roman grid pattern, a central forum, public baths, temples.
A theater, an amphitheater. The works.
The works. And as the Western Roman Empire started its gradual decline, the Latin name Lutetia began to evolve in the local dialects. By the 5th century, it's attested as Parisian, and then it eventually crystallizes into the Paris we know by the 13th century.
And the mid-3rd century AD marks that pivotal transition to Christianity, a story that is just inextricably linked to the legend of St. Denis.
It is. The legend of Saint Denis, the city's first bishop, is maybe the most dramatic origin story in French history.
It's incredible.
Tradition holds that when he was brought before the Romans and refused to renounce his faith, he was executed on the highest hill north of the city,
Which was then known as Mons Martyrum.
the Hill of Martyrs, which, of course, we still call Montmartre.
But the execution wasn't the end of the story. That's the myth.
No. The legend claims that after his beheading, Saint Denis miraculously picked up his own head and walked, headless, for several kilometers, preaching a sermon the whole way.
Incredible.
And the spot where he finally fell became the site of the Basilica of Saint Denis.
Which established it not just as a religious shrine, but as the burial place for French royalty.
Exactly. It solidified the city's spiritual importance for centuries to come.
So the city's fate was just continually cemented by its location and its spiritual patronage, which the Franks, who were pushing into the region, fully recognized.
Oh yes, Clovis the Frank, the first king of the Merovingian dynasty, he decides to make the city his capital in 508 AD.
And that act confirmed Paris's strategic centrality within the new kingdom of the Franks.
It did. It led to the gradual integration of the Frankish population and language into the local dialects, forming the basis of what would become Parisian French.
But even a new capital faces brutal tests. The sources detail that the defenses on the Ile de la Cité, they failed to prevent these devastating Viking sackings.
Especially the major attack in 845. Those raids highlighted the city's vulnerability, but also, paradoxically, its incredible resilience.
How so?
Well, the Viking success eventually led to the massive siege of Paris between 885 and 886. And the city's successful defense, led by the local nobility, proved beyond any doubt that controlling those river islands and their bridges was vital.
And that military success had huge political consequences, didn't it?
Absolutely. The decisive defense led directly to Odo, the Count of Paris, being elected king of West Francia.
Which marks the start of the Robertian and eventually the Capetian line of French kings.
Right. From that point on, Paris wasn't just a regional center or a capital. It was the physical heart of the French nation, and that paved the way for the massive growth we see in the medieval period.
Right, so moving into the medieval era, Paris transforms from just a strategic strong point into a true metropolis.
A true metropolis. By the late 12th century, it had consolidated its position as the definitive political, economic, religious, and crucially, cultural capital.
And this was a period of just intense construction and social energy.
You see that energy concentrated right there on the Ile de la Cité, with the start of Notre Dame Cathedral in 1163. I mean, think about that project.
It's staggering.
It took 182 years to complete. That's a testament to intergenerational commitment and centralized resources. And at the same time, commerce was moving to the right bank, where the new city market Les Halles was established.
And King Philip Augustus was the one who really imposed the first urban design, the first infrastructure to manage all this expansion.
He was a true urban transformer. He ordered the construction of the first real city walls between 1190 and 1215. That also included extending the Louvre fortress.
And he paved the streets.
He mandated the paving of the main thoroughfares, a monumental task back then, and he rebuilt key bridges. But his most significant and maybe his most lasting intellectual legacy
Was the university.
was transforming the city's cathedral school into the University of Paris.
And that single act immediately cemented Paris's global intellectual standing.
It did. The University of Paris, especially the Sorbonne, it just drew students from all across Europe. By the 13th century, Paris was known globally as an intellectual powerhouse. They called it the mother of sciences.
So all these improvements, like paved streets, were essential for making the city habitable enough to support this huge influx of scholars and students.
Exactly.
But here's where the sources give us that less romantic view of the medieval city. By 1328, Paris was Europe's largest city.
200,000 residents, which just dwarfed London, which had maybe 80,000.
But that density came at a terrible cost to sanitation.
The hard truth here is startling. I mean, that level of packed, unregulated urbanization just rapidly outpaced any medieval sanitation capacity.
The sources mention that some street names were literally based on human waste.
Yes, using the French word merde. It's a pretty gruesome reminder that urban success often creates these Extreme environmental challenges that can take generations to solve.
That contrast cultural light battling literal filth, that feels like the definition of medieval Paris.
It is.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. Through the Hundred Years' War, the religious violence. The 17th century brings renewed royal attention, led by Cardinal Richelieu.
Richelieu, as chief minister, had an explicit mandate:
Hmm.
make Paris the most beautiful city in Europe. This was an expression of centralized French power.
So what did he build?
He spearheaded massive construction.
Yeah.
5 new bridges, the new chapel at the Sorbonne, and his own residence, the Palais Cardinal, which was later renamed the Palais Royal.
But then comes the great paradox. Louis XIV, the Sun King, he abandons the capital. He moves the court to Versailles in 1682. Didn't that diminish Paris?
It was a strategic shift, not a diminution. Louis XIV was, well, he was afraid of the volatile Parisian populace after the civil unrest of the Fronde.
So moving the court was about political control.
Precisely. But Paris remained the engine. He let the arts and sciences flourish by sponsoring institutions like the Comédie Française and the Academy of Sciences. And critically, he ordered the old city walls demolished and replaced with tree-lined avenues.
The famous Grands Boulevards.
The very same.
That's a powerful symbolic shift, isn't it? Transforming the city from a fortress into an open cultural capital.
It was. It also laid the physical groundwork for the Enlightenment, which solidified that nickname, City of Light. By 1780, the population had exploded again to 650,000.
And this massive concentration of people and, more importantly, radical new philosophical ideas, it created an extremely volatile environment.
Extremely.
The sources mention the growing poverty and density in specific areas, especially the working-class neighborhood of the Faubourg Saint-Antoine. Why there? Why did that district become the epicenter of the French Revolution?
The Faubourg Saint-Antoine was strategically vital. It was an industrial area filled with artisans, factory workers, people suffering from economic hardship, and they were exposed to all these radical pamphlets from the Enlightenment thinkers.
So when the political crisis peaked,
This concentration of disenfranchised workers became the active force. On July 14, 1789, they seized arms and famously stormed the Bastille, the physical symbol of royal despotism. And that set the entire revolution in motion.
and the subsequent reign of terror was devastating.
It was brutal. By 1793, the king, the queen, even the elected mayor of the new Paris Commune, they were all beheaded in Paris.
The sources say over 16,000 people were officially executed across France.
Yes, the revolutionary government nationalized property, closed churches. It was a complete social and political reset.
Despite all that trauma, the population rebounded quickly. By 1815, it was at 660,000. And this influx set the stage for the first comprehensive urban planning vision under Napoleon I.
Napoleon immediately focused on imposing centralized control and building monuments to national glory.
Right. He replaced the elected government with a prefect who only answered to him.
Yes, and he commissioned the Arc de Triomphe, a statement of military power, and vastly improved neglected infrastructure. He fixed the water supply, built the Canal de l'Ourcq.
And founded Père Lachaise Cemetery.
Yes, finally moving burials out of the city center, which addressed a huge public health crisis.
But the iconic Paris that people imagine today, the wide, uniform avenues, that is the product of Napoleon III and his prefect, Baron Haussmann.
Between 1853 and 1870.
And we often think of Haussmann's work as just aesthetic, but the sources hint at a strong element of control, of military strategy, behind those wide boulevards.
This is a crucial distinction. Haussmann's renovation was simultaneously a public health imperative and a massive exercise in social and military control.
So it wasn't just about beauty.
The beautiful standardized facades of Paris stone, that was part of it. But the strategic goal was to prevent future revolutions. By creating these exceptionally wide, straight boulevards, the authorities could clear the dense, disease-ridden slums, improve traffic, and most importantly, prevent insurgents from easily building barricades.
And it allowed the military to move troops and cannon quickly.
Exactly. Those elegant avenues were essentially designed to suppress popular uprisings.
They were instruments of counterinsurgency disguised as magnificent urban planning.
Precisely. Though he also made vast improvements. The big forest parks like Bois de Boulogne and Bois de Vincennes, new sewers, aqueducts, it did drastically improve public health.
And this renovation also gave us the current administrative structure.
Yes. In 1860, Napoleon III annexed the surrounding towns. legally expanding Paris to its current boundaries and creating the 20 clockwise spiraling arrondissements,
Of course, that period ended in fresh trauma with the Franco-Prussian War and the bloody brief reign of the Paris Commune.
which was brutally suppressed during the Bloody Week in 1871.
Okay, so moving into the 20th century, we have the Belle Époque, the Beautiful Era, which was all about massive technological display.
The Universal Expositions were the catalysts. The 1889 one gave us the Eiffel Tower.
Which, as the source notes, was initially met with shock and disdain by Parisians.
Many considered the iron structure a temporary eyesore. Then the 1900 Exposition gave us the Pont Alexandre III, the Grand Palais, and the very first Paris Metro line.
And while culture flourished, the city faced military threats. The source material has that fascinating anecdote from WWI about the Parisian taxes.
It's an incredible detail. During the critical First Battle of the Marne in 1914, between 600 and 1,000 Parisian taxis were quickly requisitioned
To do what?
to transport about 6,000 soldiers to the front line, an unexpected and crucial logistical feat that helped save Paris from German invasion.
And that victory led into Les Années Folles, the crazy years, which really established Paris as the global arts mecca.
This era drew a phenomenal concentration of talent. You had the lost generation writers like Hemingway and Joyce,
Artists like Picasso, Matisse, Dali.
photographers like Man Ray. Paris became the laboratory for Fauvism, Cubism, and Surrealism. Artists found cheap studio space and intellectual freedom in places like Montmartre and Montparnasse.
Then comes the dark chapter of WWII. The German occupation begins on June 14th, 1940.
And despite being declared an open city, the occupation was psychologically devastating. The sources contain that painful detail about the Rafale de Valdiv in July 1942.
This is when the French police, on German orders, arrested thousands of Jews.
12,884, including over 4,100 children. They were confined to the Winter Velodrome before being sent to extermination camps. This institutional complicity is a vital, difficult part of Parisian history. The city was finally liberated in August 1944.
But post-war, Paris didn't escape internal upheaval, the Algerian War, and then the seismic general strike of May 1968.
In May 68 was a fundamental challenge to the established order. Protesting students occupied the Sorbonne, worker strikes paralyzed the country.
And the official response included breaking up the massive, centralized University of Paris
Into 13 autonomous campuses. The idea was to decentralize intellectual power to try and mitigate future concentrated protest.
And before we pivot to the modern city, we have to mention the presidential architectural legacy. Every leader wants to stamp the city with their own monument.
It's a French tradition. Pompidou gave us the radical Beaubourg Center. Giscard d'Estaing transformed the Gare d'Orsay into the Musée d'Orsay.
But François Mitterrand was the great builder of the late 20th century.
He was. He commissioned the Opera Bastille, the new Bibliothèque Nationale, the Grande Arche de la Défense, and of course the controversial but now iconic Glass Louvre Pyramid.
These projects were statements that Paris, even with its deep history, was constantly looking forward.
And the ultimate proof of that forward-looking resilience is the ongoing successful reconstruction of Notre Dame after the 2019 fire. The city always rebuilds. Fluctuat nec mergitur.
That sense of resilience, of constantly adapting its physical form, it leads us right to the contemporary structures of the city. Geographically, Paris is often described as flat.
But the elevation varies enough to matter historically. The lowest point is just 35 meters, making it prone to floods, but it's punctuated by those crucial hills.
Montmartre rising to 130 meters.
Exactly. And the Seine River Loop defines the core, with the two islands Île-Saint-Louis and the historically critical Île de la Cité as the city's cradle.
And the contemporary administrative city is clearly delineated by the Boulevard Périphérique.
Yes, that 35-kilometer orbital expressway defines the 105-square-kilometer core. Everything inside that ring is the administrative city of Paris. Understanding that is essential.
And speaking of environment, the climate is officially oceanic. What does that mean for the average Parisian?
It means generally mild conditions, but with increasing volatility. Winters are cool, summers are warm, averaging around 22 degrees Sava. But the data confirms a serious vulnerability to climate change.
Intense, prolonged heat waves.
The 2003 heat wave was a catastrophic example. Temperatures exceeded 30 degrees safety for weeks. And this trend culminated in the record high, a brutal 42.6 degrees CD in July 2019.
A huge challenge for a density built primarily of stone.
Enormous.
Okay, so let's turn to governance. Paris was controlled by the national government for centuries. It only regained municipal autonomy relatively recently.
In 1974.
Yeah.
And that was critical. It allowed for the election of the first modern mayor, Jacques Chirac, in 1977.
And the process for electing the mayor, currently Anne Hidalgo, is complex and indirect. How does that work?
It's designed to ensure stable governance. Voters don't vote directly for the mayor. They vote for the 163 members of the Conseil de Paris, the Council of Paris.
And it's a closed-list proportional system. What's the core consequence of that?
The consequence is that the system guarantees the winning coalition a clear majority of seats on the council, even if they only win by a narrow margin.
So it prevents a fragmented council and ensures the mayor has the legislative power to get things done.
Precisely. It connects back to Napoleon's desire for centralized, effective control.
And that centralization also led to the recent streamlining of the first 4 arrondissements.
Yes, in 2020, they were unified into a single administrative division called Paris Center, with one mayor, just to simplify governance for the oldest, densest parts of the city.
But the truly ambitious move is the Métropole de Grand Paris, the Grand Paris metropolis.
This was created in 2016 to link the core city with its sprawling suburbs. It's primarily an administrative cooperation structure.
It covers a massive area, nearly 7 million people. But the sources reveal this startling disconnect with its budget.
This is the critical political insight. The metropole's scope is massive. It handles urban planning, housing, and environment for a region that generates 25% of France's entire GDP.
And yet,
its administrative budget is a minuscule 65 million.
compared to the city of Paris's budget of 8 billion euros.
Exactly. The metropole was deliberately created with a small budget and limited fiscal powers to appease suburban mayors who feared losing their autonomy.
Which means coordinated regional planning remains extremely difficult.
Very difficult.
And speaking of power, Paris isn't just a regional center. It is the unquestioned nerve center of France.
Absolutely. The national government is entirely concentrated there. The president at the Élysée Palace, the prime minister at Hotel Matignon,
Parliament, the highest courts.
all housed in prestigious historic buildings within the core. And internationally, Paris hosts UNESCO, the OECD, the European Space Agency. It's an Alpha Plus city in city, deeply integrated into the global network.
This concentration of power leads us to demographics, which reveals some surprising trends. Despite its global pull, the core city population is actually declining.
That decline is a key finding. Between 2013 and 2023, the population dropped by over 120,000 people, down to about 2.1 million.
Why is this happening?
It's a classic urban crisis cocktail. Lower birth rates, middle-class families migrating to the suburbs for cheaper housing,
And tourism.
and the critical contemporary factor is the loss of housing stock to short-term rentals. It's making the city prohibitively expensive for non-wealthy residents.
But even with that drop, Paris is still defined by its extreme density.
It's still the most densely populated city in Europe, with 252 residents per hectare.
And the wider Île-de-France region is incredibly diverse, built on waves of migration.
Profoundly diverse. Data shows that about 41% of the Paris region population were either immigrants or had at least one immigrant parent.
With significant populations from the Maghreb and sub-Saharan Africa.
Yes, these communities are vital to the service economy and the cultural fabric of the eastern and northern neighborhoods.
And how is this reflected in the religious landscape?
A 2011 survey showed 61% identified as Roman Catholic, but the non-Christian communities are historically significant. About 7% identified as Muslim, and the Jewish population is estimated at 282,000.
Which makes it the largest concentration of Jews in the world outside of Israel and the United States.
It does.
Okay, moving to the economic engine. Paris's identity is overwhelmingly services and commerce.
Almost entirely. 80.6% of enterprises are in commerce, transportation, and financial or business services. Industry is less than 4%.
And this specialization creates these massive employment centers like the QCA and La Défense.
Right. The Quartier Central des Affaires in the central western arrondissement employs 500,000 people in high-end services. And then you have La Défense, just to the west, Europe's largest dedicated business district.
The corporate power centered here is just staggering.
It is. All top French companies in the Fortune Global 500 are headquartered in the Paris region. The region's GDP, $765 billion, accounts for an incredible 32% of metropolitan France's entire GDP.
But the sources clearly show this massive wealth is not evenly distributed. There's a stark geographical disparity.
This is the lasting legacy of Haussmann. He structurally cemented a permanent wealth gradient.
So in the wealthy western part,
In the 7th arrondissement, for example, only 7% of residents live below the poverty line.
And if you travel
To
east,
the 19th arrondissement, that number jumps to 25%. A quarter of residents live below the poverty line.
it's a profound social divide reflected right on the map.
Absolutely. The structural decisions made 150 years ago define the city's sociology, and that pattern extends right into the suburbs.
And finally, the tourism juggernaut.
Paris is universally seen as one of the world's most attractive cities. In 2019, Greater Paris received a record 38 million visitors. The sector employs 12.4% of the region's workforce.
And the drawing power of the attractions is immense.
The Louvre, in 2022, saw 7.7 million people. The Eiffel Tower, 5.8 million. The Musée d'Orsay, 3.27 million. It's a nonstop flow.
Which brings us to that strange anecdotal outcome, the phenomenon known as Paris syndrome.
It's a psychological condition, documented mostly in Japanese tourists, where the reality of the dense, sometimes abrasive, real Paris clashes so violently with their romanticized expectations that they suffer acute psychological distress.
Wow. It just highlights the immense cultural weight and idealized image the city carries.
It really does.
The title City of Art is hard-earned. Parisian artistic output has been continuously elevated and controlled by institutions since the 16th century.
And that control was formalized with the establishment of the Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture in 1648.
Which dictated styles, controlled the famous salons. But by the 19th century, Paris became less about a single academic view and more of an experimental laboratory.
It did. You see the birth of Romanticism with Géricault, then Realism, and then the revolutionary Impressionism of the 1870s and 80s.
With artists like Monet and Renoir redefining how light and color were captured.
Exactly, often painting the burgeoning Parisian leisure life outdoors,
And that momentum carried into Les Années Folles, the interwar golden age.
which drew an international cohort. Picasso from Spain, Van Gogh from the Netherlands, Matisse, Dali. They congregated in specific neighborhoods, developing movements like Fauvism, Cubism, and Surrealism.
And the city retains this cultural memory through an incredible density of museums.
The variety is its strength. You have the Louvre anchoring everything, then the Musée d'Orsay for Impressionism, and the Centre Pompidou for modern and contemporary works.
And beyond traditional arts, there are specialized experiences.
Right, like the Musée du Quai Branly for indigenous art, or the utterly unique experience of the catacombs, holding the remains of 6 million people.
Moving from painting to prose, Paris has been the undisputed center of French literature and publishing for centuries.
The tradition is ancient, but the 19th century giants, they used Paris as their central character.
Victor Hugo, in particular, managed to link his work directly to the physical survival of the city.
His novel, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, is widely credited with inspiring the national movement to preserve and restore the cathedral. And later, Les Miserables chronicled the city's social turmoil, using its alleyways and barricades as a visceral backdrop.
What's fascinating is how seriously France and Paris treats its literary infrastructure today.
It's a culture defined by books. The Fifth Arrondissement alone has about 150 bookstores, and French law protects them.
Right, the law preventing heavy discounting.
Books and ebooks cannot be discounted by more than 5%. This policy actively shields small, independent bookstores from being annihilated by large chains.
Let's shift to music. Paris's classical roots stretch back to the 12th century with the Notre Dame School of Polyphony.
And by the 19th century, it's a global center for opera, hosting the 1875 premiere of Bizet's Carmen.
And the venues reflect this blend of history and modernity.
They do. You have the classical, opulent Opera Garnier and the sleek, modern Opera Bastille. For theater, the oldest is the Comédie Française from 1680.
And the popular side of nightlife is inseparable from the music halls and cabaret.
The birthplace of the French can-can, most famously at the Moulin Rouge. And later, after WWII, Paris became a crucial European center for jazz, the spiritual home of gypsy jazz, through figures like Django Reinhardt.
And finally, we have to touch on gastronomy and fashion.
Luxury dining as we know it begins in Paris. The first luxury restaurant opened in 1786. Today, it has over 9,000 restaurants, including 10 three-star Michelin establishments.
And understanding the culture means knowing the difference between a cafe, a bistro, and a brasserie.
And those distinctions are rooted in social history. A cafe was an intellectual salon, a bistro was a modest neighborhood joint, a brasserie, originally a brewery, serves food and drink all day.
And the height of luxury, fashion.
Paris has been the international capital of haute couture since the 19th century. It remains the global arbiter. It's home to Dior, Chanel, and Paris Fashion Week is one of the top 4 international events.
To understand how this dense historical city functions today, we have to look at how it moves. And Paris has received global accolades for its commitment to sustainable transport.
That recognition reflects a paradigm shift. The city is consciously moving away from being auto-centric.
The commuting data is startling.
Walking is now the most popular mode, 53.3% of all trips. Public transport is 30%, bikes are 11.2%, and cars, a mere 4.3% of trips in the core city.
The backbone of all this is the colossal rail network.
It's the largest in Europe. You have 6 major railway stations. The metro is the busiest subway in the EU. And superimposed over this is the RER, the Regional Express Network.
Which links the core city to the suburbs. RERA is the busiest metro line in all of Europe.
It is.
Yeah.
And the system is undergoing a massive expansion aimed at better integrating the whole metropolitan area.
The Grand Paris Express.
One of the most ambitious transport projects in Europe, 205 kilometers of new automated metro lines, scheduled for completion by 2030.
And how does this infrastructure project impact the social divide we talked about?
The old RER was designed to move people from the suburbs into Paris. The Grand Paris Express is designed to connect the suburbs to each other.
So it's about lateral movement.
Exactly. It aims to reduce the social and economic isolation of the peripheral areas, finally bridging that historic core periphery divide.
In terms of global connectivity, Paris is also a critical air hub.
Yes, the world's 5th busiest airport system. Charles de Gaulle is the EU's busiest airport and the 4th busiest globally by international traffic.
Returning to the built environment, Paris has maintained very strict urbanism laws, which gives it that coherent look.
But those laws have also constrained the housing market. Only 33% of residents in the core city own their home. The majority rent. And the distribution of social housing reinforces that wealth gradient we discussed.
From just 2.6% in the wealthy 7th arrondissement to nearly 40% in the 19th.
Precisely. And that stratification continues right into the suburbs, illustrating that persistent 19th century sociology.
Despite the intense density, Paris is surprisingly green.
The city manages over 421 municipal parks, covering more than 3,000 hectares. Haussmann's team created the big perimeter forest parks. And in the 21st century, the emphasis is on innovation, like the Promenade des Berges de la Seine with its floating gardens.
And a final note on death management. The ban on inner-city burials led to a spectacular outcome.
That 1786 ban forced the relocation of human remains to the stone mines, creating the famous catacombs, which hold the remains of 6 million people.
Wow. And educationally, Paris is a national leader.
Highest concentration of highly educated people in France. The legacy of the Sorbonne is powerful, even though it was broken up into 13 universities after May '68.
And medically, the city boasts Europe's largest hospital system.
The APHP. And one of its institutions is the Hôtel Dieu, founded in 651 AD. Our source notes it is the oldest continuously operating hospital worldwide, another stunning reflection of Parisian longevity.
What an immense journey. We've traced Paris from, a muddy Gallic swamp defended by spear people,
Right.
to a resilient global metropolis defined by geometric planning and intellectual ferment. The city has really lived up to its motto, fluctuat nec mergitur.
Tossed by centuries of waves but never sunk.
Exactly.
I think the key takeaway for anyone studying urban policy is Paris's ongoing mastery of managing historic, massive urban density. Every grand project, from the Roman roads and Haussmann's boulevards to the RER and now the Grand Paris Express, has been a necessary, ambitious response to the pressures of an ever-growing population in a tiny geographical core.
We've examined the past and present, but let's end by focusing on the future. The city is now consciously leveraging that historical density for a radically sustainable future.
That is the massive commitment to transforming urban mobility. The sharp reduction in car usage, the push to make walking and cycling dominant. It's about transforming the dense core to maximize quality of life in the face of climate change.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner, looking at Paris and thinking about urban policy? I think you have to consider the profound implications of the 15-minute city concept. It's being implemented by Mayor Anne Hidalgo, and the whole policy aims to ensure that all key necessities, work, shopping, education, leisure, are reachable within a short walk or bike ride.
And this strategy brilliantly uses the structure that Haussmann imposed, but it turns its purpose toward democratic accessibility.
Right.
It takes the city's inherent historical density, the very quality that once gave rise to those filthy medieval streets, and uses it as the foundational resource to create a radically sustainable urban model.
So the question is, how might this historically dense, resilient, and always evolving city of light, successfully pivot its entire urban model to meet the challenges of the next century, and in doing so, set a new global standard for what high density, high quality urban living looks like. That's the monumental question Paris is answering right now.